It was the kind of morning that erases the ordinary. October 9th, 2025, 9:50 a.m. Thick dusk hanging over the front lines. 71 armored vehicles rolled out with the confidence of an army that expected to smash through and be home by nightfall. T-72s, BTR carriers, tracked MTLBS, pickup trucks bristling with weapons and motorcycle columns, a two-pronged force built for speed and surprise. What they did not know, what they could not imagine, was that every rumble, every diesel whisper and radio squawk had already been seen, heard, and counted. Overconfidence became a lethal mistake. This is the story of how calculation, technology, and patience turned hunters into the hunted. From the command center in Ukraine, alarms lit up like a constellation gone red. Analysts watched engine signatures and intercepted chatter. The Vidra 3 vibration scanner registered heavy tracks north of Velika Kamyanka. An R168 radio post picked up a flurry of transmissions well above routine levels. Two independent signals crossed at the operations map, and a joint command split second later decided this was not a passing convoy, but a deliberate infiltration, a raid with one objective: hit the mining strip and seize the crossroads. The response was quick and cold. If you move in force, you will be met with force, but not the brute kind. This would be an ambush of networks and timing, not merely of steel and shells. In minutes, reconnaissance drones climbed into the sky. A fixed-wing PD-2 rose and found the convoy weaving into pine shadows. Thermal overlays showed rows of heat signatures where lights had been turned off. Russian jammers hummed through parts of the spectrum, but the Ukrainian drones shifted to inertial navigation, synthetic aperture radar, and encrypted links, a layered approach that let the surveillance eyes keep watching even inside the electronic fog. The picture became clear: two groups moving separately. The northern element was heavy: tanks and armored carriers, recovery vehicles, and tow trucks. The southern element was light and fast: pickup buggies, dozens of motorcycles, and teams meant to infiltrate and pull out quickly. The intent read like a plan: hit, seize, disappear. With the route and purpose nailed down, commanders sketched an answer: a two-pronged ambush synchronized to collapse the convoy's cohesion. Hidden Leopard tanks were moved into prepared firing positions along the northern approach. Infantry fighting vehicles and mechanized elements waited, masked and patient. Artillery batteries, self-propelled guns kept out of sight, took aiming solutions, and plotted the likely corridors of approach. FPV teams and kamikaze drones stood by. Loitering munitions were primed. Spotters specialized in anti-armor work crawled into position with laser rangefinders and comms already linked into the fire control net. Everything was a node in a single, ruthless geometry. When the first T-72 eased out of the tree line, it did so into a tableau that had been prepared for it. A tank hunter's laser clipped the lead vehicle and fed its data to a Leopard's ballistic computer. A single 120mm kinetic round found its mark. The result was immediate and terminal for the vehicle and its crew. In the span of heartbeats, the northern spearhead began to burn. One round, then another, unthreaded the column. Tracks were torn, engines ruptured, turrets lit into flame. The convoy, so sure of its momentum, turned in an instant into a choked alley of steel. This was not chaos. It was calibrated collapse. As the Leopards hammered key nodes, artillery fired guided rounds into formation gaps. Precision munitions, programmed and steered, slammed into command vehicles and rear elements, fracturing the convoy's ability to coordinate. Secondary explosions followed as fuel and munitions cooked off. Support vehicles were neutralized, recovery assets rendered useless. Where vehicles attempted to regroup, infantry fighting vehicles and concealed mechanized teams opened fire from protected dips in terrain. The northern flank was effectively decapitated in rapid, violent strokes. Simultaneous to the northern strike came the southern snare. Light columns and motorcycle groups, trained to exploit breaches, drove into a kill zone they could not see. A first artillery cluster round tore into a lead pickup carrying air defense missiles. The explosion rippled through the line, and a chain reaction of obstacles and crashes followed. Motorcycles scattered into one another and into soft shoulders. Speed turned to confusion, as the southern column became a jammed tangle of bikes and buggies. The Ukrainians then let the precision tools finish what timing had begun. Loitering munitions dove on stalled vehicles. FPV teams struck cab and engine compartments. Guided artillery broke up attempted formations. The assault was surgical and swift. Where the Russians had planned a short, sharp raid, they met a layered answer, a combination of stealth, timing, and overwhelming targeting. The battlefield that day was a mosaic of sensors and steel. Drones streamed real-time video to command nodes. Spotters verified targets. Artillery and armor executed in linked choreography. Electronic warfare lines hummed, keeping enemy sensors confused while Ukrainian systems shifted frequencies and navigation modes. The result looked like a carefully choreographed sequence rather than brutal improvisation. First the observers, then the hunters, then the breakers, then the cleanup. By the time smoke had settled into the pines, the convoy's cohesion was gone. Losses were severe. Most of the 71 vehicles were put out of action within the first 40 minutes. Columns that had been a single, intimidating mass were reduced to scattered hulks and burning wreckage. Rescue and recovery teams that tried to reach the field were turned back by mines, loitering drones, and the threat of further strikes. The psychological shock to the attacking units was as significant as the material loss. Commanders reported confused, erratic chatter as survivors attempted to reconcile what had happened in a corridor that had been called the convoy's safe passage. For the defenders, the operation proved several things in stark relief. First, intelligence and persistent observation can alter the arithmetic of force. Second, layered defenses that combine electronic warfare, reconnaissance, and precise firepower can defeat larger formations moving with confidence. Third, once logistics and support vehicles are lost, the attacking formation loses the essential scaffolding that keeps it moving. The ambush was not merely a tactical success. It was a strategic humiliation that forced an immediate rerouting of supply lines and a temporary paralysis of local operational tempo. After the strike, the field became an eerie tableau. Blackened steel, twisted frames, and the occasional plume of smoke marked the landscape. Ukrainian teams moved in cautiously to confirm destruction, collect ammunition data, and set remote sensors to deny recovery. Thermal nets and camouflaged quadcopters watched for any late movement, while engineers laid additional anti-tank obstacles and pre-planned remote triggers designed to deter salvage parties. The goal was not to seize trophies, but to deny the enemy the ability to restore combat power swiftly. Left in place, the wrecks would be a constant reminder, a physical scar that spoke to both loss and warning. The ripple effects were immediate. Local Russian units reported disrupted command and control, leading to a lull along adjacent sectors as higher formations reorganized. Intercepts showed days of staccato, disjointed traffic as supply convoys were rerouted and reserve elements called forward. Ukrainian intelligence teams used the pause to tighten surveillance, extend interdiction options, and force the adversary to disperse at greater length. The operational pause turned into a larger tactical advantage. For nearly 2 days, enemy movement along critical axes was drastically reduced. Yet the cost to both sides should not be romanticized. War leaves ruins and holes in the lives of those who live nearby, villages that watched columns roll by and later watched the smoke. Civilians 6 miles away saw plumes and felt the tremor of explosions. The psychological weight of such strikes reverberates beyond statistics. The fighters on both sides, survivors and fallen alike, remain people caught in a vast machine of state ambitions and tactical responses. What this ambush showcased was not an isolated miracle, but an evolution of the battlefield. The increased role of persistent surveillance, the blending of electronic and kinetic tools, the decisive value of precision fires, and the multiplication effect of small, well-coordinated teams. It was a textbook demonstration that in modern conflict, speed and surprise still matter, but they can be neutralized by patience, integrated systems, and disciplined execution. In the immediate aftermath, Ukrainian commanders cataloged material gains and losses. The convoy's destructive potential was erased. Several recovery and electronic support vehicles were destroyed, and a sizable number of short-range air defenses and mortar assets were lost with their carriers. More importantly, morale suffered in the attacking force. What had been a confident raid became a cautionary tale in field reports. Never assume safe passage. Never move without denial of hostile observation, and never rely solely on surprise when the other side has redundancy in sensing. For Ukraine, the ambush delivered a rare combination of tactical victory and strategic message. It disrupted an offensive thrust, raised operational costs for the adversary, and reinforced the effectiveness of a network defense. For forces across the line, it was bitter proof that arrogance and routine could be punished by a smaller force that was cleverer, more connected, and patient. And the landscape remained changed. The wrecks would rust where they fell. Trees would bear the scars of fire and shrapnel. Local populations would remember the sudden thunder and the long, attentive silence that followed. Commanders on both sides would file reports and iterate tactics. But one simple truth would endure. On that October morning, a convoy that moved with certainty met an answer welded from surveillance, timing, and precision, and the result reshaped the front for days to come. This was not the last ambush, nor the final lesson. Wars are built from such moments, small, decisive, costly, after which plans are redrawn and strategies recalibrated. Yet the memory of that morning, of diesel and radar and laser light cutting a path through the pines, will linger in after-action reports, and in the quiet of villages that watched the sky and knew, in a new way, what modern combat can do.